Hello, readers. Today, I want to share with you poetry. I can see and hear you all now. Oh, but Miss Neal, poetry is boring. Well, I have 3 fantastic titles to share with you that will make you rethink what you know about poetry. Poetry is powerful. It can connect us to the past, it can inform us about the present, and it can inspire us for the future. Poetry has the power to connect us to the past and remind us of history we should not forget. I recommend A Wreath for Emmett Till by Marilyn Nelson. This beautiful little book packs a powerful punch. For those of you who don't remember or don't know, Emmett Till was a 14-year-old black boy who was lynched in 1955 for allegedly whistling at a white woman while visiting relatives in Money, Mississippi. His mother chose to hold an open casket funeral in his hometown of Chicago so the world could see the horrors of the Jim Crow South, and his death was a spark that lit the flame of the civil rights movement. I want you to read this book for 3 reasons. First, because Emmett was a kid like you, and his story should not be forgotten. Marilyn Nelson beautifully shares the story of Emmett's life and death, as well as how his death is still relevant to us today. Nelson reminds us that we must bear witness to atrocity, but we are whole. We can speak what we see. You should also read this book because it's beautifully illustrated. I know, many of you think you're too old for picture books, but like the illustrations in a graphic novel, the illustrations by Felipe Lardy add a whole new dimension to Nelson's poems. The pictures use color and imagery to help tell the story. The artist's note at the end is well worth the read, as he explains some of the Easter eggs, yes, just like in a video game, that give deeper meaning to the drawings. You should also read this book because Nelson does some really cool things with writing that are worth checking out. The book contains a heroic crown of sonnets. You may know that a sonnet is a 14-line poem in iambic pentameter, da-dun, 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 that usually rhymes. Shakespeare used it a lot. A crown of sonnets is a set of sonnet where each sonnet gets its first line from the last line of the previous poem. A heroic crown of sonnets? Well, read the book for yourself and consider whether you could create something this complicated that makes sense. I'm not the only one who loved this book. It was both a Coretta Scott King honor book and a Prince honor book. A Wreath for Emmett Till by Marilyn Nelson. Check it out. So maybe you're not sold on jumping right into a book of traditional poetry. I get it. How about a novel in verse, like Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds? Poetry can inform us about the present. And lots of authors are using poems to tell a story that reads like a novel. And a lot of these authors are telling diverse, multicultural stories that are amazing. You may have heard of Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. She has additional novels in verse, and there are also Kwame Alexander, Elizabeth Acevedo, and Margarita Engel. But my favorite is Jason Reynolds, and it's not just because I've met him, took these photos of him, and discovered he's a really nice guy. His books are amazing. In Long Way Down, 15-year-old Will has just lost his brother in a dramatic episode of senseless gun violence. Will lives in a neighborhood where there are 3 rules. Number 1, crying. Don't, no matter what. Don't. Number 2, snitching. Don't, no matter what. Don't. Number 3, revenge. If someone you love gets killed, find the person who killed them and kill them. The book follows Will's internal journey as he takes the long way down from his 8th floor apartment to the lobby to go follow these rules. Along the way, he confronts some ghosts and demons from his past. I'm not going to tell you what happens to Will on that ride, but I do love this book. And I think you should read it. Will is a kid like any kid. Jason Reynolds knows young people, and Will feels real. As you go with him on his journey, you will understand everything he feels. This book packs a lot of punch into a very short read. I know teens have a lot of demands on their time. If you read, you want it to be worthwhile and ideally not take a lot of time. This is a book that you can sit down and read in an afternoon, but then spend days thinking about. I love the space that poetry gives you on the page. It makes me feel like there's room for me to breathe around what I'm reading and really think about what the character and the author are saying. And this novel in verse is no exception. Like with A Wreath for Emmett Till, I'm not the only one who loved this book. Look at these award stickers: Newbery Honor, Prince Honor, Coretta Scott King Honor, and the book won the Walter Dean Myers Award for Outstanding Children's Literature. So, go now and read Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. All right. Maybe you are not only not ready for traditional poetry, maybe you aren't ready to tackle a novel in verse, even though you should. It's more like flag football than tackling. But how about a novel with poetry? Even better, how about a novel with rap? Yes, rap. Rap is poetry. If you don't believe me, you can go listen to Jay-Z. I have a book that shows how poetry can inspire us for the future through rap. I recommend On the Come Up by Angie Thomas. Want to know a secret? I liked this book better than The Hate U Give. Maybe it's because I got to see Angie Thomas do this.
But grown-up Angie is not a rapper, and she has to close her eyes. In the beginning of the book, there's a rap battle. For those who don't know what battling is, it's basically where two rappers go at it against each other. And you're coming up with stuff off the top of your head, so it's really hard. And the goal is to basically embarrass the other person so bad that everybody's like, ooh! That's really it. Okay, I'm gonna be mild real quick. You gonna be mild? Yeah. All the girls like me because I'm black. Yeah, I go issues. That's not even rap, but that's close. Okay. So Bree comes at him at the end, and she's like, my apologies, see, I forgot my manners. I get on the mic because it's my life. You show off for girls and cameras. You're a pop star, not a rapper. A Vanilla Ice or a Hammer. Y'all hear this crappy dumping out? Somebody get him a pamper and a crown for thee. The best have heard about me. You can only spell brilliant by first spelling Bree. Now see, naturally I do my shit with perfection. Better call a bodyguard because you're going to need some protection. And on this year election, the people crown a new leader. You didn't see this coming to your ghostwriters didn't either. I came here to ether. I'm sorry to do this to you. This is no longer a battle, it's your funeral, boo. I'm murdering you. I'm not going to make my story now. I'm warning you. Tell the truth, this dude is boring. You confused like a foreigner. I'll explain with ease. You're just a casualty in the reality of the madness of Bree. No fallacies, I spit melodies, causing fatalities, and do a casualty damaging reference for that man. I move at light speed. You stuck at per hour. You spit like a lisp. I spit like a high power. Breeze the future in you today like Matt Lauer. You coward, but you a G and ain't convincing to me. You talk about your clothes, about your shopping sprees. You talk about your Glocks, about your ICE. But in this battle, they all talking about me. Breathe.
That is poetry in action. And yes, that is Nick Stone, author of Dear Martin, with Angie Thomas on the stage. You do not need to have read The Hate U Give to enjoy this book. However, On the Come Up is set in the same Garden Heights neighborhood as The Hate U Give, and it is helpful to know that Khalil's shooting, a key plot driver in The Hate U Give, provides a backdrop of social, gang, and racial tensions for On the Come Up. On the Come Up is the story of 16-year-old Bree. Bree's father was an up-and-coming rapper who was murdered by one of two rival gangs in Garden Heights, so Bree's mom is not the most excited about Bree's chosen career path. Bree is getting lots of encouragement from her Aunt Pooh, a member of one of those gangs, the Garden Disciples, and from her father's former manager and frenemy, which may or may not be good things. Bree is also dealing with trouble at school and changes to her friendships, familiar territory for lots of teens, but she feels alive and strong when she raps, and is determined to pursue her dreams in spite of her mother's reservations. When one of Bree's raps unexpectedly becomes a hit, but paints Bree as something she is not, she has to determine whether the cost of pretending to be someone she isn't is worth the opportunity at fame. So I think you should read this book. With some fun rap battles, some solid friendship issues, and a dash of romance thrown into the mix, the book is a great read. In keeping with the poetry theme, though, I encourage you to pay attention to Bree's process of writing. Angie Thomas was a teen rapper and dreamed of being a rap star just like Bree, and it's really interesting to read about the process of writing poetry in rap form. I also encourage you to think about how Bree, like any great poet, is inspired to write by what is happening in her own life and considers how her writing may reflect back on people she cares about or even affect the small kids in her neighborhood who idolize her. So even if you aren't ready to jump into a book of nothing but poetry or a novel in verse, check out On the Come Up by Angie Thomas and consider that maybe poetry is around us in unexpected forms every day. Thanks for listening. I hope that you will read at least one of these great books. A Wreath for Emmett Till by Marilyn Nelson, with poetry that connects us to the past. Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds, a novel in verse with poetry that informs us about the present. And On the Come Up by Angie Thomas, a novel with poetry in the form of rap that inspires us for the future. If you have ideas for books that I should read or themes that I should address, visit me in the library, email me, or follow me on Instagram.